All right, Chris Cuomo here. I have to tell you, I haven't been as proud as I am tonight since we first started here at NewsNation, because as you know, I wasn't sure I was ever coming back to TV. The town hall of Palooza, or whatever you want to call it, has been such a confirmation of what I know we can be about. And not just because it did well, and it really did do well for NewsNation, even though last night we were up against one of the most exciting World Series games that happened to have involved the two biggest TV markets that I've ever seen. And by the way, I'm a Yankees fan, and of course they lost, but it was still an amazing game. But here's why I'm so happy, I guess is the right word. We pulled off something. I mean, I know most of you guys, this won't matter to you, but I got to tell you, any media people who are watching this, the team as small as we have at a startup like NewsNation that hasn't had a lot of reps doing these kinds of productions, no one has ever done anything of this scale. I'm telling you, I've been with the best, most experienced shops. We would spend weeks getting a single guest and some audience questions going for a town hall. And it should take time, and it's not easy. I had more co-hosts than I've ever seen, let alone guests. And the real relief, though, I'm happy for the team. I really am. But why you guys liked it. In a world of constant attack commercials, I can't even turn on my TV. I can't even look at my phone. And all of it is one note. Which side is worse? Scaring you to death. A racist versus a radical. That's what it is. That's all it is. Trump sees nothing and no one that is any good in this country except himself. And Harris, look, she's taken the low road. He is wildly unpopular. But to just and mainly constantly encourage the idea that he's a dictator in waiting, that's the best. There's no constructive dialogue. Interviews that do get reach, like Rogan, it's a wet kiss. Oh, he's not an interviewer. He's just a conversationalist. Listen, that's great. I love the podcast, not so much because of him, but because of the guests, because they want his reach, right? But that's not what I'm not here to have a conversation alone with someone in power. You have to test them. You have to test them. And look, I give Rogan credit, and I'll explain why in a second, because he is adding something that's helpful, but not in the context of talking to people who seek or hold power if they're going to bullshit you the whole time. I think we could get the straight gay vote. The gay male vote, says Vance. Really? When Trump just called Anderson Cooper one of the best known gay men in the media in America, Allison? Really? Was this fourth grade? And it goes on. He doesn't say anything. Rogan, The reason you loved last night, it was actual disagreement, but with decency. You should have seen the buzz during the commercials between all the different people, regardless of party. And I know that was happening even on social media, that dumpster fire. Why? Rogan has it right. Conversation is the cure, all right? Listen, I'm interviewing a president or someone who wants to be president. I'll be conversational, but I got to test them. But not, when it's people who just are from the party or they're pundits or they're, experts, you got to be conversational. It can't just be straight combative. That's the operative theory of my show and my podcast, and it happens to be the answer to the most frequent misconception, that I'm somehow different since I left CNN. Well, I'm different as a person because I got shit canned and I had to figure out how to deal with it, but I'm the same man. It's just a different time. I could shred Trump every night like tissue paper and any of his surrogates, okay? I'm not gassing myself up. I've been doing this a long time. I study hard. I do it at a high level. And I could also wow you with what I know about the Democrats and what they're not being. And it would spin your head. Where would all that aggression get me? Where would it get us? Me? It'd get me a bigger following. Okay, what does that do? Where would that get us? A battle to exactly where we are is where it gets us. A battle to the bottom, more divided than we should ever be, and over nothing. okay? Controversies and nonsense. We are not fighting about what matters. I know deep in my bones, and last night is proof of premise, conversation is the cure. You got to put out the different ideas because I trust you to make your own choices. As long as you can just get a fair shake at being exposed to contrasting ideas. So thank you. Thank you for proving me right. And let's do it again. All right? And I want to thank my bosses because let me tell you, this is not an ambitious business. It's not an innovator's business. They all came last night and they allowed us to try something that nowhere else I'd ever been would even think of trying. And Dusty, please come up here for a second. Dusty, she pulled this off. It was her idea. With the tiniest team in the business, she pulled it off last night. Amazing, amazing. Thank you. Congratulations to you and the team. Like, look at all the empty seats around.
I know,
anyway,
there's nobody here. They're tired from last night.
You're the only one who should be tired, and you're here. But I'll tell you, I was very gratified. I don't really care about the ratings. You know, we're building here. I get it. And we're up against the World Series. But it was better. I thought I would get, a lot of hate just because it's me. Mm-mm. And it couldn't have gone any better. And for the right reasons. And with real people.
Real people. And you know what's funny, I just want to say as a little behind the scenes, I'm going to do this quickly, but the true test was after the show, which is always the show after the show, right? Is that all the biggies, you, Bill O'Reilly, Stephen A. Smith, Geraldo Rivera, Bobby Kennedy, Sarah Palin, everybody was in the back. O'Reilly ordered pizza pies for everybody, and everybody was just having a great time after the show. And I thought everybody was going to leave angry, and it was just the opposite. And that really summed up the night. It ended as well.
I mean,
as
look, even Cuban was slicing and dicing last night, but Dana White was here for it. O'Reilly, was as nice as he can be about it. I don't think he paid for those pizzas, by the way. I think Mike did. I think Mike Korn got him.
Okay, I was trying to throw him a bone. All right, he always charges it to NewsNation, O'Reilly. You know that. You should see the bills I get from that guy. Anyway, let me read you just a few of these comments so we can get to our great panel. All right, so a few of these. Lance, Khalil, these are all from X, by the way. The civility of this town hall gives me hope that I've lost lately in people being able to sit down, exchange ideas without being disrespectful to each other. T-Bone from 1975, again, all on X. Thanks, Chris and NewsNation, for putting together people with opposing views and allowing them to speak. Dialogue is so important, and no matter who wins the election, we all must do better in society. One of my favorites, Mary Beth Carney, the only Grand Slam in New York City last night, hashtag Cuomo Town Hall. And then Tim Halsey said this is the most diverse panel and great town hall. And they just go on like that. It was I was pressed to find critiques, which trust me, I always look for people to criticize you, and I had a very hard time. I tried.
Well, they're out there, but the point is that's always going to be present, right? Negativity is a proxy for insight these days. That's the problem with social media. It has so much potential. But what we learned last night is our politics is being dominated by magnified minorities because of social media. And that's how you get that disconnect number. To answer my own question that I started with last night, 81% of the people say we're more divided than united, and it's more that they've seen. Yet 70% say we all want the same things. What is the answer to that riddle? Because those two takes should not go together.
I think we should.
It's because they are reacting to social media, but they know that's not their reality.
And I think, and I really want you to get to because we've got a huge show tonight. We just packed
it
with UFO breaking news. But I also want to just say that I think and I'm going to regret saying this, but we should do something very similar in the couple weeks after the election, because things are going to be, there's going to be even more to talk about. And let's see if people can behave the same way they did last night. That'll be an interesting test, I think.
I think the farther away from the election you go, the more reasonable it will be. You just got to see. We set a very high bar. Anyway.
Okay, we move on.
Thank you very much for what you did. I love you, and thank you. All right. I also learned another lesson last night. I actually invited back one of our guests from last night because of it. Look, as someone who's been doing this a long time, and I try to be sensitive and learn about perspectives that are outside my own, right? We have limitations of our own human experience. Even though I'm a husband and a father and a brother, that doesn't mean that I connect with what reproductive rights means to women. And Jenna Arnold, first of all, I think Jenna Arnold was one of the stars of last night, by the way. There's another reason I invited her back. She was a guest sitting in the front row who was a canvasser working on the Harris campaign. And you do have to have this conversation really led by women. So we're going to do a little different tonight. I have two women, and really I just want to listen to them have the conversation about what they think matters and the contrasting points, right? So we know that this race is very split gender-wise. I think that has more to do with Trump than Harris, by the way. I think the reason he has men is because of Harris, right? I think there is a bias there, and it's grievance, and it's culture grievance, and I think that plays to men. But I think the reason women are going for Harris is, okay, Harris putatively, but also because of reaction formation to Trump taking away a right from them. Did Trump make it worse for himself with the comments he made yesterday at a Wisconsin rally on the heels of talking about immigration and protecting the border? And I'll tell you something, straight up Maya Angelou, this is who he is. Believe him.
I'm president. I want to protect the women of our country. They said. They said, sir, I just think it's inappropriate for you to say, pay these guys a lot of money. Can you believe it? I said, well, I'm going to do it whether the women like it or not.
Here's how Harris responded.
Did everyone hear what he just said yesterday? That he will do what he wants, quote, and here's where I'm going to quote, whether the women like it or not. He does not believe women should have the agency and authority to make decisions about their own bodies. This is the same man who said women should be punished for their choices.
First time in history, we have seen a class of people have a right taken away from them, and they happen to be the biggest part of the population, women. Polls show women are outpacing men in terms of early voting. Now, that is not unusual. The numbers are a little unusual, not compared to the pandemic, but that's not fair, okay, because we had an unusual early voting. I want to have a conversation between two women about how this lands, how much of a factor it is in the overall vote, and hear how they feel about it. Strategist, former GOP national spokesperson Madison Gilbert, and Democratic activist and entrepreneur working with the Harris campaign, Jenna Arnold. You remember her from last night. It's good to have you both. Madison, it's good to have you back.
Good to be with you.
Let's flip the script here. And Madison, I'll let you start off with the comments from Trump do seem demeaning. Are we missing something, or does it play differently for women? Explain.
Well, I think women could potentially be the deciding factor in this election next week when hindsight's always 20/20, but when you look back after next Tuesday, I think we could very specifically be looking at white women. This is a group that in 2012, Romney won by 9 points, Trump 6 and 7 points respectively, but in some polls, he's polling as little as 1 point up with these women. Obviously, the very first election post Roe v. Wade for a presidential cycle, but white women have turned out in historic numbers. They've been the highest turnout voters in the past decade, and I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see where they vote. Obviously, they're coming out, they're voting early, but do they stick with Trump? I don't know. We'll see what happens. I think there is a risk here, and Nikki Haley's talked a lot about this. A lot of people have talked a lot about this. I think President Trump has turned off some of these women, unfortunately, and this could potentially decide the election. Obviously, he's made up those numbers with some minorities and some other demographics, but it doesn't mean that it's not a risk that could potentially lose them the election on the Republican side.
Jenna, and then just let me listen. You guys go. You take it.
Chris, I want to be sensitive of time. It's what they're mentioning in my ear. Madison, I have a quick question for you. How do you think white women are going to break this cycle?
I think that they will break for Trump, but I don't think it may be large enough in some of these states. It's going to come down to Pennsylvania. It's going to come down to Michigan and Wisconsin. These are states with larger percentages of white women than the national average of 38%. We're seeing, I think, 42, 43, 44% in those states. And so that's why I think we could see this make a huge difference if they don't break large enough. I do still think they break for Trump. And I think that's because of the economy. I mean, you see them polling what's their number one issue for women as a whole, not just white women, but women as a whole. Okay. They poll the economy as their number one issue, most of the time over abortion. Sometimes you see abortion creep in there as number two over immigration, which you're seeing as the larger number two.
I understand that the right continues to want to center economy and border. And often that is the wedge
that's
issue
what women center in the polls.
I'm not actually paying attention to what's happening. It's the same thing that they turned abortion into in the 70s, specifically run by Dick Cheney when he was a much junior staffer, where they said, hey, what's the thing we can get people riled up about? They're trying to do that around trans right now. I happen to be an expert on this subject, not just because this is my lived experience, but I wrote a very long book about the state of American white women going into 2020. They are the largest voting bloc, and they will decide every election through 2060, at least all the Senate races through 2060. They have the greatest power economically. They control, we talk about what their economic power is. They decide the toothpaste brand, the car brand, the church that the family's going to, and the college that the kids are going to. So their influence on how America shows up is extraordinary. Now, 51% of Americans, white women, voted for Trump in 2016, 55 in 2020. And a lot of folks, mostly women of color, or at least this perspective was certainly led by them, reminded us that white women benefit from their white men being in power. They get to draft off of them. After Roe was reversed, there was we're going to draw the line. Now, we are not going to see
but 55% of white women voted Republican in 2022. Following Roe v. Wade being overturned. In the midterms. 55% of white women voted Republican in 2022 in the midterms following the overturn of Roe v. Wade, which I think was a very interesting number because I think a lot of people expected that this number wouldn't be as high as it was, which is why I think there is some concern, for Democrats on that.
It's a very good point, but you have to see how many additional white women registered to vote going into 2020, which skews that number. Now, from my perspective, which is how we made that jump from 51 to 55, from my perspective, the answer is not going to be zero, so it's problematic. So there is, Chris, to your point, a much larger conversation that white women need to have that we're not going to be able to pull off in this block. But the fury about women having to constantly validate themselves, protect themselves and each other. Even Sarah said it last night, Chris. She and I made a deep, long, hard eye contact when she said, this is nobody's business but the women and the women she chooses to surround herself with.
But I also think that, when you look at women across the country, they're just as fired up about going to the grocery store and not being able to buy what they usually would buy for their kids. I talk to women here in Ohio every single day, and they're upset. They're making decisions they didn't have to make back in 2019. So to downplay their concerns about the economy, I don't think is fair or accurate. Because again, you continue to see them say that the economy is their top issue. No one's forcing them to say that. No one's lying to them. They feel that way. They feel it in their everyday lives. They feel it as they continue to have to provide for their families. A lot of single moms out there have to provide for their children, and they're not making more money than they were, but everything is costing them more. They can't afford to buy their first house as a result of what has happened over the past couple years. And so this is a very real reality that women across the country are living. It doesn't mean that some women aren't focused on abortion, but that is not the only issue in the country. Women are not a monolith as a voting group.
Correct. It is a false binary to try to
put a button on it, Jenna, and then we'll make a last point, Jenna, and then we'll continue the conversation. Obviously it's not the last time we're going to talk about this, but give me a last point so I can get going.
My question is for your voters. Would you let your cute teenage daughter be in the same room with Donald Trump by herself?
Yes, I would.
My closing question, Chris.
Okay. Jenna Arnold, thank you very much. Madison, look, it's good having you back. I love the contrast. This is what the show's all about. I appreciate you guys both. We'll keep talking about it, all right? It's good to have you both. To be continued. Thank you for showing up tonight, especially after last night, Jenna Arnold. And Madison Gilbert, appreciate you as well.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Chris. Great job last night.
4 minutes and 5 seconds. Thank you very much. Coming up, 5 days to go before the election. The economy is, of course, the number one issue. It almost always is, unless you're in a war, okay? It grew 3% last quarter. Did you know that? The GDP. Home sales are headed for one of the worst years ever. Why? Hard to borrow money. So, who has the better plan to fix that? Trump or Harris? Top real estate investor Grant Cardone says Trump is the man. Why would Cardone go on with Cuomo? You don't know that conversation is the cure, and you'll see why next.
Is the least qualified candidate to ever run for any political office in American history. She's a fake, a fraud. She's a pretender. Her and her pimp handlers will destroy our country.
The interesting thing is, the Democrats say the same thing about Trump as what you just heard from real estate giant Grant Cardone. That was at the MSG rally. He is a big Trump guy. He is a huge businessman and brand, and Trump friend and ally. 5 days to go. Now, I wanted Grant to come on to make the case that Trump is the right guy to deal with the housing problems in the economy. The problem for Trump is the data keeps getting better, right? The U.S. economy grew 2.8% in the last quarter. It was strong. Consumer confidence is trending up, okay, having the biggest 1 month rise that we've seen since March of 2021 coming out of the pandemic. But there are still big problems, including affordability, renting, and of course, buying. A recent report found home sales are on track for their worst year in nearly 3 decades. How are things getting better if this reality is going to be the worst? Nearly 2 million homes for sale in the country. Only 15% of those are considered affordable. Trump's plan? Open federal land, develop housing. What about building costs? He also wants to deport millions of undocumented immigrants who he says are driving the housing crisis. I think that they're a small part of it. Harris plans to develop 3 million new houses through tax incentives and also a $25,000 tax credit for first-time home buyers. So that means people who aren't first-time have to pay for those who are. And how's she going to pay for that? What's she going to cut in spending? Let's have them discuss. Top real estate investor Grant Cardone is with us, okay? And to go with him, let's bring in Grant Cardone. And to go with him, the former mayor of New York City, Mayor de Blasio. Bill de Blasio. Bill, thank you for being here. Grant, I told you I'd have you on, you handsome bastard. You just didn't know it was going to happen.
Chris, you look good. I'm glad you didn't leave TV, my friend.
All right, so let's set the table,
Chris,
and then I'm going to stay out of it.
Here.
Hey,
that's right.
And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. If anybody knows how to build a house, it's an Italian. All right, so Bill, you know where Grant is coming from. That the problem is Biden's fault. Trump is better for the fix. Let's start there. Grant, we've heard Grant's position. Don't hide, Grant. Come back on Cramer. Bill, go ahead and make your case. And then, Grant, you respond. Don't wait for me.
Okay.
Well, as you said, Chris, the economy's getting better. I'm not belittling for a second that Americans are going through a whole lot still, inflation and otherwise. But the economy is getting better. Interest rates are starting to come down. They're going to come down more as the economy improves, based on the very report you just showed. That's going to be crucial. Kamala Harris, as you said, look, she's talking about first-time homeowners, and she's talking about a way to spur on housing development. That's a lot more substantial than what Trump is offering. There's a lot we could be doing at the federal level, bluntly, with things like Section 8 vouchers. That would be huge for renters in urban areas all across this country. Used to be a bipartisan consensus around that. We got to get back to that. But the notion that it gets solved by federal lands, people are not living by where the federal lands are. People are living in urban areas. And what we need to do is spur on housing construction and subsidize, where necessary, rents in those areas. So federal lands are just not even close to solving the problem. And you talk about folks who are undocumented, about, let's say, 12 million Americans who, whether we like how they got here or not, they're part of our communities, they're part of our economy. You're not going to be able to take those folks out of this country without a huge uproar among Americans of all stripes. That's the beginning of a decay of our liberties overall if the government starts to mass deport people. But even beyond that, as you said, Chris, I think to the extent it has any bearing on the housing situation, it's a minimal one, where a lot of those folks are living in rural areas and certain urban areas. Not necessarily where the housing problem is. The housing problem is all over this country right
Chris,
now.
Fine. Grant, pick it up. I don't want to do too much about the immigrants. You can make any argument you want, but make your response.
We had a problem that's so unsolvable before you let 20 million people in. Look, it is unreal. The federal lands thing, that's Trump. That nobody wants to live on federal lands. I completely agree with Bill. Building 3 million homes in this country would cost $10 billion. Okay, you would never get it done in a year. The best housing year we ever had was in 2005. We built 2 million homes. Interest rates were nothing. So the reason, and Bill, you made a comment that interest rates are coming down. They're not coming down. The Fed reversed by a half a point, and interest rates, mortgage rates actually went the other way, almost an entire point. The average mortgage in this country is $416,000. It costs about $3,500 a month before maintenance, insurance, PMI, property taxes. It's unaffordable. So only politicians use these two words together, affordable housing. It does not exist. It will never exist again unless you come up with some freak technology that aliens drop on this planet. It's gone. Rents are one half of what a mortgage is today, and people are screaming about the rents. This is the solution, though. The solution is to take, there's about 45 million, the apartment stock in this country is about 45 million. There's about 4.5 million vacancies today. If you have 4 million houses short, provide an incentive to property owners today to fill those vacancies up, and you don't have to build anything, and it wouldn't take more than a week to fill them up. The second solution would be the $12 trillion sitting in equity in homes with baby boomers that are Chris's age and older. Well, Bill, your age and older. You old guys, not us young guys that own homes, and you have all this equity. You could actually give an incentive to those people that are no longer interested in their homes. They're actually interested in the rental life so that they can go on cruises and enjoy life, not mow their lawn. And without raising any taxes, you could provide solutions and alternatives without having the government start to do a bunch of Section 8 stuff that has always failed.
Bill, give me a quick reaction to that, and then I want to play something for you guys. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was starting to warm up to Grant here, but no, Section 8 actually, again, bipartisan program actually has worked and needs to be reinvigorated. But I think Grant makes a good point about a lot of the apartments that could be energized with the right kind of federal support. I think that's perfectly fair. I think that's something actually Democrats and Republicans could agree on, that sometimes an incentive or a subsidy is the thing that actually cuts through while we try and fix the bigger problems underlying this, which is that people's wages are still lower than they should be in general. They have been for 40 years.
And the problem with both of these guys is they both talk tax cuts. Nobody talks cutting spending. Wait, let me pivot real quick before I run out of time.
In fair defense to Trump.
Go ahead, Grant.
Trump has never mentioned the housing problem because he knows you cannot build 4 million houses in this country.
Yeah, but you know what? You don't have to build them to deal with a problem. You know, the problem with Trump is he loves to cherry pick. You know, he loves to pick on problems that he can blame on someone else and not have to do anything about. I want to play Mark Cuban, though, because both of you guys will resonate off this. Let me play something he said on The View that's getting a lot of attention. I'm not sure it deserves, but that's for you guys. Here it is.
We're a Nikki Haley supporter like I was in the primary, but now you're supporting Kamala Harris. And turns out Donald Trump is not even asking Nikki Haley for her help to try to reach her voters. What do you make of that? And do you think having people like Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and other Republicans with Kamala Harris is going to put her over the edge with these Nikki Haley supporters?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it'll put her over the edge with Nikki Haley supporters. Donald Trump, you never see him around strong, intelligent women, ever. It's just that simple. They're intimidating to him. He doesn't like to be challenged by them. And, Nikki Haley will call him on his nonsense with reproductive rights and how he sees and treats and talks about women. I mean, he just can't have her around. It wouldn't work.
Now, I want a hot take from each of you. Bill, I'll start with you, but I must say one thing. I had Paul Manafort, who's very close to the campaign, on yesterday, the day before. He said they had reached out to Haley. And I have seen Haley on Fox and elsewhere talking as if she was, a surrogate for the campaign. But take it on face value. Bill, one, do you have concerns that women will construe this the wrong way as being misogynistic by Cuban? What is your take on what he said?
No, I think Cuban's saying something that there's a lot of evidence is accurate. But look, on a political level, Donald Trump should have humbled himself and asked Nikki Haley to be a big part of his campaign, just like Hillary Clinton should have done in 2016 with Bernie Sanders. And when a candidate has an opponent who's got a substantial base in their own party and they don't welcome him in, bad things can happen. And I guarantee you a lot of those Haley voters are going to end up with Kamala Harris.
Grant Cardone.
Hey, Chris, I love Mark, but nobody recognizes Mark right now. He's a simp and a sellout. He's looking for a job at the SEC. My mother, my sisters, my wife were offended by that comment. By the way, they're all white females. And there's a lot of strong, intelligent women that are going to support and vote for Donald Trump.
I think there's a difference between are going to support him and that we can name being around him. I'll say Lara Trump. Correct. I'll say Kellyanne Conway, but I don't know how close she is in right now. But he's not known.
She's a strong, intelligent woman.
I mean, I don't think she's helped him that much, to be honest.
But even that, I don't know. 3 years.
Listen, I get it. You only have 3 years to graduate. Grant, you only have 3 years to graduate from law school. Even I did it.
The person runs for president.
Chris, it's 2024. You don't see strong women around him. You just don't. And you do all in the rest of the political spectrum, Democrat, Republican, strong women playing crucial roles.
I'm not saying strong women aren't going to support Trump. I'm saying his team isn't known for being that, except for the ones that I went.
Around him, right.
Right. All right. Bill de Blasio, I appreciate it. Grant Cardone. Bill's always welcome on the show. Grant Cardone, good to TV meet you. And it's good to meet you in person. You're always welcome here. Thank you for making the case.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Be well, fellas. 4 minutes and 30 seconds coming up. So there's drama in the Diddy case. And I don't know, man. This is a little bit of a curveball. All right. There's a witness that just testified in front of the grand jury. Does this person have all the tapes? You know how we keep hearing about the tapes and now it's all about who's on the tapes and everybody's quiet because they're on the tapes? As well as ex-Kim Porter's diary. Do we believe it? And if true, what is the potential? Next. New witness before the grand jury in the Sean Diddy Combs case. Courtney Burgess, former associate of Kim Porter, that's Diddy's ex-girlfriend, mother to 4 of his children, and unfortunately, the woman we've seen in the video. The allegation, he has seen, that's Cassie, not Kim Porter. Cassie's the one we saw in the video. It's hard to keep them straight, let's be honest. All right, so he has seen, which I think is the key word in this story, salacious videos of Diddy and celebrities engaged in sex acts, including with underage victims. He also alleges to have the unedited version of Kim Porter's diary. True? What's the chance? And if so, so what? We know many lawsuits have been filed against Combs alleging abuse. Many of them, to this point, have been anonymous. Now, there is a reason that people are often allowed to allege and be anonymous. However, a judge ruled that a woman who anonymously sued Combs this month for rape must reveal her name on her lawsuit or will be tossed out. The lawsuit alleges Combs raped her in 2004 at a party in a Manhattan hotel. She was 19, college student, also allegedly ordered her to perform oral sex, or else he would have them both killed, her and a friend. Otherwise, he would have them both killed. What does this mean for that lawsuit? What does it mean for other ones? All right, I want to bring in one of Combs' former lawyers, Mark Geragos, and a lawyer who represented dozens of victims in the Jeffrey Epstein case, Jennifer Freeman. Good to have you both. Counselor Freeman, welcome to the show. Mark Geragos, what's the smell test on Burgess? Seeing videos is different. You know, I was reading reports online that says he has the videos. You know, very different. Because if he has them, then he has to produce them. Seeing videos, what would trigger concern of strength in the case?
Well, the first thing is I watched, I believe it was a TMZ tape of this young man, and he was questioned as to whether he knows Sean. I believe he said yes for 30 years. They said, "You've met him?" And he says, "No, I've never met him." Then apparently he before said he had tapes. Then it turns out he's seen tapes, and then supposedly has a diary, but now apparently doesn't have a diary. You know what I think, and I find it interesting that you asked me if it was the smell test. I think the prosecutors think that he failed the smell test. I suspect that the prosecutors brought him in front of the grand jury to run it down because I don't think anybody's buying what he's selling.
They should have done that before they brought him on then. Counselor Freeman, let's pivot to this other issue. Of course, you can comment on whatever you want, but the other issue is, what do you make of the judge saying that this plaintiff must say who she is or the suit gets tossed out?
This is very disappointing and disturbing for other sexual assault victims, including this one. It presents a Hobson's choice for her and other victims, meaning she can choose justice or she can choose privacy, but she can't have both.
It's
give me
interesting. Jennifer, do you have, because I've had this situation, I've had clients who I give them the kind of that choice because, as I'm sure you advise them, hey, you know, we can file anonymously, but I'm not sure it's going to play out that way. How do you advise a client on that? Because you've done this before.
I've done this many, many, many times. And frankly, it usually works out with an anonymity. Pseudonyms are typically granted, especially in New York, since there is a particular New York civil rights law, Section 50B, that provides for an anonymity and confidentiality for sexual assault victims. So it is something that doesn't seem to have been addressed in the court's decision. I'm not exactly sure why, but certainly it can be something that goes on, that you might not be able to be have a pseudonym, but you usually get it. Now, this is a judge that just recently in the Epstein case also denied anonymity.
You know, my experience is, though, that, and obviously it's anecdotal, but I'm not in the weeds on that particular statute, but I read the opinion, and I thought it was well reasoned in the sense that, look, if you're going to come here, if you're going to file these lawsuits, if you're going to make these allegations, then there's got to be some way to test it, and you can't just say it's going to be an attorney's eyes only revelation, meaning I'll turn the name over to the attorney, but the client can't get it. And in this case, what's particularly concerning is you've got all of these, you know, there's lawyers out there doing basically 1-800-DIDDY, and it reminds me of like they're trolling for asbestos cases. And I think at a certain point, there's got to be some kind of a gatekeeper function, and I get the impression that's what this judge is doing.
I get the gatekeeper issue, but this should not have been an issue just turning it over to the attorneys. The defendant is entitled to know who the plaintiff is. You have to provide that information to the plaintiff, and you are entitled to get discovery regarding that plaintiff and test the credibility. That doesn't mean the whole world can know and the media circus can start, and the incredible imbalance of power and resources can be used against this particular.
But nothing is more powerful, Counselor, as you both know, than the allegation, right? And you called it a Hobson's choice. It's interesting for you guys at home. Hobson's choice, very old adage. A guy ran a stable and used to offer people, you can have the stable near the door or none at all. That's not really what this is. You can bring the case, but you have to own it, put your identity out there, and let yourself be scrutinized, as the Constitution suggests. The law has given shield for specific reasons that I think are very honorable. I think it's also been very extended. But we'll see what happens with it, and we'll continue the conversation. Counselor Freeman for freedom. I love it. I love the ring of it. You can use it. You can use it. You can use it. No charge. Garagos, I got nothing that rhymes with your name. Take care. Thank you very much, both. 3 minutes and 45 seconds. It's good to have you. Asparagus. That's how he taught me how to say his name when I first met him. Garagos, like asparagus. I was like, what? Anyway, Pentagon. Secret alien crash retrieval team. Why do you need that? Why all the secrecy around it? Somebody who has answers. Next. If there's nothing to see here, why do you need an alien spacecraft retrieval team? Let's bring in NewsNation special correspondent, investigative journalist Ross Coulthard. It's great to see you as always, Ross. The time is yours. What do we need to know?
Pretty simple, Chris. On the one hand, you've got the Pentagon denying a retrieval program, denying that they've been involved in the retrieval of alien spacecraft, and yet we now know from FOI documents and a new interview with Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the former head of the Pentagon's UFO investigation program, that they have been developing protocols for a UFO response and recovery and material transfer. So it's a direct contradiction. It does appear that they are, in fact, providing protocols for what we do know is indeed a secret retrieval program inside the Defense Department.
Ross, how do you explain them continuing to repeat the same mistake, which is assuming anything will stay secret in government?
I just don't know why they think they can get away with it, Chris, because very slowly the secret is coming out, and there's no good reason why the public can't know that we're not alone. There's good reason to protect technology. There's good reason to protect weaponry. Nobody wants to breach national security concerns. But I think the public have got a right to know that there is a non-human intelligence engaging with this planet, and that we have indeed retrieved non-human technology. An incredible allegation, but true.
And they laugh at us for reporting on this and for you saying that all the time, but they fuel it with the lack of transparency. If they're all coming from China or from wherever, fine, then just say that. They're fueling it. Ross, I appreciate the continued effort. You will always have a platform here to report. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chris.
We'll be right back.